what you have is what is known as survival of the fittest, the law of the jungle. You see, and this is why when people who proposed the Darwinian theory, when they started to fit man into the picture and give images, they would always put the image of the European man as the one in the end. The others, who were the Asian man, the African man, these were stages of evolution. So this was like justification for their colonization of the rest of the world and the rape of the various societies, because they were the fittest. They're the ones who, survival of the fittest. This is justification. It's all about, who has the most power and can use it to their own personal benefit. So science, in what is known as modern Western science now, is leaning towards finding justifications for this concept, which remains, although, there have been changes, because as anthropology, found the earliest of men, or what seems to be the remains of the early men, kept finding them in Africa, they ran into a problem here. So, black Americans, made a big noise about this in the Smithsonian Institute there in Washington. The first man, he's presented as a European man. Everybody else are apes, right? The first man is a European man. But this conflicts with, even the evidence that they've gathered. So eventually this year, or just last year, the end of last year, they closed down the exhibits for the evolution of man and put the first man as being, a dark-skinned, African, Asian mixture of a man. So their own research is causing them to have to back down off some of these positions. But still, in the minds, that produce the literature, etc., this concept is still, there. Man's existence is by accident, and whatever you can get out of this life, that's what it's all about. And this is also why you find in the West, the Hindu philosophy has become very popular. Because the Hindu philosophy of reincarnation, it fits in with this materialist approach. Whatever you can get out of this life, do it. Have a good time, get the best. Because when you die, you got another chance. You can come back and try again, get some more or whatever. So, you're sort of absolved of really having to do good, per se. Though in the theory, as the Hindus teach it, you do go through stages. If you're a bad guy in this life, you go down the evolutionary ladder. You may end up as an ant or, a worm or something like that in the next life, right? However, the Westerners, they key in more on, you just got another chance. And so you find a lot of people coming up now and talking about their earlier lives. They're doing, putting people under hypnosis and talking about, they were this in the time of the Romans and they lived these different lives they went through. So it's sort of promoting and more this idea, of just take what you can. Human responsibility to your fellow man. It's not important.
What is your opinion about hybrids, particularly in the plants, not so much on green animals? Among the plants you have hybrids, which are produced by human knowledge. You are seeing, I will give an example. In a particular rose plant, you can have a variety of colors.
Mm-hmm. Now they're producing the blue rose and the white rose, yeah.
This is a hybrid. Could it be attributed to creation, or could it be attributed to human knowledge?
Well, this is knowledge, human knowledge of the workings of the animal kingdom has allowed man to manipulate to a certain degree. Not to create, he's manipulating only. He's not creating, he's manipulating. The ability to produce a white rose existed in the rose plant. Or to produce a blue rose. They exist in the rose plant. That ability is there. Man, with his knowledge of the genetics, etc., has been able to manipulate so that this ability is brought out. We have the Mandarin, cross between the tangerine and the orange, But the thing is that these have not really produced what we could say a new species. It is still within the same family. Some of the hybridization will take place even naturally. Some of it takes place even naturally, in both the animal kingdom as well as the plant kingdom. So this is not beyond, or this is not evidence for evolution, and it is not beyond the concept of special creation.
Question of health. Came across a hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari. In volume 4, page 335, I think it's hadith 537, narrated by Abu Hurairah, where the Prophet has said, if a fly falls in the drink of anyone here, he should dip it in the drink. So one of the drinks has a disease and the other has a cure. It is meant to go for that disease. To what extent is it acceptable?
Well, of course, Maurice Bucaille felt that this was unscientific, and on the basis of this he argued that hadith, very literature, cannot be really trusted. I mean, you can only trust it in so far as it agrees with what is scientifically known to be fact. However, poison of the cobra, and we've always known that if you are bitten by a cobra or you drink some of its poison, it will kill you. Yet, we're now using that poison for people who have heart problems, to help their heart problems. You have a number of different medicines and medicinal techniques now which are employing what was commonly known in the past to be harmful. So, just because human science has not reached the point where they have not researched it in depth, it has not become a point of research to determine. Just because we have not found that, does it mean that the hadith is not is unscientific? No, all we can say is science knowledge today shows us that fly will carry microbes and so and so, and that this carries certain diseases. However, that does not deny the possibility that within the fly it carries an antidote to these diseases. Okay? We could say this is an area where Muslim scientists have failed, because science in the Muslim world is following the West. After the period of colonization, the rise of the European powers, the decline of the Muslim countries, we find that science also went into a decline. Muslims lost touch. So mostly they are serving and working in Western institutions and following Western trends. However, if Muslims were independent, developing their own research centers, etc., etc., this is an area of research which could possibly be followed. Because when I look at something like that, right, why I would take that position is because there are so many other things that have proven to be true from the Prophet ﷺ. For example, and I mentioned this to you all before, Prophet ﷺ had informed us that it is disliked to sleep on one's stomach. It is only in these last 10 years that scientists, doctors now tell us you should not sleep on your stomach. You should not even put your child to sleep on its stomach. They're saying this is a common factor in the cot death, SBS, sudden death syndrome amongst children, for For grown people, the main cause of back problems, the problems of the discs and the curvature of the spine, etc., they say it's caused from sleeping on the stomach, because there's no support for the spine when one sleeps on one's stomach. So, when we look at that, and there are other things that the Prophet ﷺ has spoken about, which in our recent times, we've come to realize and to understand. The prohibition of pork, for example, in more recent times we've found out, biological evidence for the harm that there is in it. We understand that, what has been given to us by the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, commanded of us, this is based on revelation from Allah, and it is the truth. The fact that we don't have the evidence to understand that truth does not mean that it isn't the truth. So we don't, as Muslims, for example, in Western tradition, a fly falls in the drink, you throw away the milk. It's gone. In Islamic tradition, the fly falls in, dip that fly, you throw him out, and you utilize that milk. You don't waste. So when we consider the Muslims, for example, in situations where their food, drink, etc. is limited, etc., who save themselves by utilizing this, by being turned away, without having to wait 50 years from now when finally science comes across the antidote in the fly, alhamdulillah, they followed the revelation and benefited. As the Muslims who did not lie on their stomachs, who circumcised themselves, did not drink blood, did not eat pork, etc., those who have followed the commandments of Allah in the Quran or through the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's direct teachings, have saved themselves, have benefited in both this life as well as the next.
The question of evolution is within the beginning. Man is evolving to be faster. Do you think that this is only a theory, it's not a fact?
Evolving to be faster? No, we can see that there is development. In Japan, they just had it in the newspaper just recently that this generation of Japanese are taller and heavier than the last generation. Their diet has changed. It affects the people. Now you start to feed people, like the man who now trains, specializes in athletics. You're giving him a special diet and learning all these techniques about muscles and so. Sure, there is development. But does he become a bird? Does he he's changing he's no longer a man? No, he's still a man. So development in men, we don't deny this possibility.
What have you got to say about sex changes? That has natural sometimes, is that needed?
Well, sex change, basically, when we use the term sex change, this is induced. You may have people, who are what they call hermaphrodites, people who have, both male and female organs, and at a point in their life, one may dominate the other, or depending on their upbringing, one, parents may consider him to be a boy, and then later on, as the others the hormones kick in, they change over and they're considered a girl. This is like a natural process which happens, Whereas in the case where the unnatural way, where an individual decides, well, I just want to be a woman now, homosexuals decide, I don't want to be a man anymore, I want to be a woman. So they surgically change that individual, pump him up with hormones so that, he doesn't grow beard anymore, and, etc. Physical changes take place in his body. This is, man's ability to mutilate man. It's nothing new. Castration of the past is version. Because, of course, when a person is castrated when they're younger, to do this in Rome, to keep the boys in the choirs, be able to sing those high notes, they castrated the kids, so they will be able to, so it affected them physically, of course. When you make certain manipulations in the body. This can cause certain other physiological changes in the body. This is nothing supernatural or beyond what could be expected.
Boris was saying one of the arguments Mary talked about the origin of life being from water and the desertion of the world. Can you expand on that? Because you're saying that there's no evolution out of species, that a classic origin implies evolution out of species.
Well, he is taking, a verse in the Quran where Allah says that He created, every living thing from water. What this refers to, whether it is literally liquids, water, aquatic origin, or as some people, other people propose, that water is made of H2O, hydrogen, oxygen, hydrogen being the primary particle as far as we can, basic atomic structure goes, that, that's the primary factor in all of living systems as we know them. Whether it is that or it is the other, we cannot argue, either way. Though we would argue that water was not, in other words, man did not come out of a water being that, crawled up on land and eventually evolved into a man. But water is essential to man's existence. The human body is mostly water. The huge proportion of water in the human body. And all of the living organisms that we know, this water is there. I mean, we could say that the Quran actually, has pointed to a fact that science now is able to put together. That water is a key factor in all living organisms. That in the process of their individual development, as one is produced from that one, water is involved in. Is a key element.
A couple of things. One, just to reinforce what you said, philosophy deriving from the Greek philosoph, friend of the mind, if I put it correctly, and science, which is from the Latin, as you said, which is knowledge. So the two things are so close together, and they can easily be switched from one to the other. So I'm highly grateful for okay, having said that, genetic science, how is it in Islam? It is a science, it is a knowledge. Should we teach our children to become genetic engineers, genetic scientists?
Well, I think there's an aspect of genetics which may be useful. For example, they have developed certain strains or working on developing certain strains of wheat or certain plants which will have certain other organisms along with them which will be resistant to certain other organisms. So this involves the process of genetic engineering. Within the limits of helping to or aiding man in utilizing the resources that God has given him, fine. But now when you are using it in the sense of, I want to create the perfect man, I want to remove all the problems, that cause people to go this way or to go that way. So this kind of create now a new man. This is where that science has gone astray. Where we may, for example, look in people who have certain genetically transmitted diseases, which helps us by the knowledge of genetics, will help us to determine such and such a person, they are likely to have such and such offspring, and we need to monitor pregnancies and so on and so. This is beneficial. But now when we use it in the other way, well, from this now we're able to determine whether you're getting a boy or a girl. So now if you're getting a girl embryo, you abort that. You try again, you keep trying for a boy. Now it becomes distorted. Because you're taking life. Unjustifiably. So, I mean, science, or what knowledge is available of the universe is a gift from Allah, which could be used Islamically, acceptable to God, would be an act of worship. It's in the service of man, recognizing the greatness of God, or it can be used against the way of God. As Allah described Satan, as trying to get man to deviate. He will come to him from one side and the other, and he will encourage him, and until he tries to change the sunnah of Allah. He will command him to change the sunnah of Allah. Allah's sunnah, the way of Allah in His creation, He will try to change it, make it something else. This is the satanic way. And that's the satanic use of the knowledge. And that's with all knowledge will exist. We'll have both sides, either the godly Islamic use or the satanic use. So the science in and of itself, we don't say it is un-Islamic. No. How you use it will determine. Its origin, the knowledge is from Allah. So it is Islamic in its origin, in the sense, in the pure sense. How you use it keeps it in the Islamic vein or takes it in the satanic vein. Any questions from our sisters in the back?
Just a different question. Is it true that Neil Armstrong, the astronaut, became a Muslim?
No, it's not true. It was a fairy tale, which...
Well, they even had the Michael Jackson became a Muslim.
Yes, another fairy tale.
So it's a fairy tale.
Yes. No wishful thinking. See, what happens is that Muslims, in a state of weakness, where they are looking at really what they have as being somehow deficient, looking at themselves as deficient. The West now becomes... So now somebody from the West, they're looking for a miracle. Like they just had in England, I read in the paper recently, a man there opened up an eggplant and he found Allah written in the eggplant. And people, Muslims now, making pilgrimage to this man's home to see this holy eggplant. This is the state that Muslims are following. I mean, Christians are famous for this stuff. But Muslims, you find them, caught up in this idea now. And of course, it is nonsense. We don't accept it. But it keeps cropping up. I remember some years back they had a picture of the bronchial tubes of the lung, and some doctor was supposed to have found written on everybody's bronchial tubes, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. And they showed the picture, but of course what had happened, they had manipulated, the picture is a very grainy, black and white picture, and they manipulated it to find that. Somebody found a fish, in India, with Allah mentioned on the side. But see, if we get caught up in this kind of foolishness, these are just what we could call flukes of nature, and much of it is, exaggerated and amplified. You see, if you're going to accept that, now you're going to make pilgrimage, when the Christian finds a fish with a cross on it, what are you going to do? And for sure, he'll find one too. What are you going to do? You're caught. So of course, for us as Muslims, our faith is not based on, what we could call flukes of nature. This is not the basis of our faith. Our faith is based on firm knowledge of revelation which has been given to us, which applied in our lives we see as something beneficial and real that improves the quality of our lives, improves our character, our moral character, improves all aspects of our lives. This is why we do. So we don't subscribe to these kinds of, because even individuals, what happened, the same thing happened. Roger Garudi, right? Former head of the Communist Party in France, who was a presidential candidate, he accepted Islam. And the Muslim world went wild. Roger Garudi accepted this great philosopher, and then he was brought around the Muslim world to give talks here and there. Fine, if he's giving talks, why he accepted Islam, fine. But then people started to asking him fatwas, to give interpretations of the Quran. And of course the man doesn't have this kind of background knowledge, but because he was a philosopher. And instead of when they, gave him something of Islam, they sat him down and started to teach him, as a child again, from ABC. Because when you come into Islam, you have to go back to the beginning, They allowed him to come in as a philosopher, and a philosopher, he has an explanation for everything. And of course, when he put his mind to the Quran, he could find explanation. And of course, what happened is that these explanations were in contradiction to what we know to be correct. People tried to correct him. Of course, the philosopher, he can't back down now, He can't back down. The philosopher, he's not going with the facts anymore. It becomes a question of ego and all these other kinds of things. So he ended up making heretical statements. And this man, prior to this, he was given the, Faisal Award and, big for Islamic knowledge. And wow. We have a man, now he's looked at as a heretic. So there was a benefit that could be taken from him to the degree of the knowledge that he had. But Muslims, you see, in their, this state where, anything coming from the West now, they're just gone crazy. This man, he accepted Islam, and they exaggerated his position, and of course caused him, well, some of the blame is with him, of course, but they put him in that position of heresy. And as I said, it's a reflection basically of the weakness of Muslims today, that they are like what they call the drowning man, clutching at the straw. He's drowning. Anything, he sees a straw floating by, he's drowning, he grabs it. Of course, if you sit and think you're going to grab a straw, it's not going to keep you afloat, but you're drowning, you grab onto anything. So, this is the approach. Very unfortunate. And of course, it means that we will continue to find these kind of stories circulating in the Muslim world, and more, examples of Allah being found in nature, trees and plants, etc. But it is for us to understand the reality of such phenomena, and to try to educate those around us to the ridiculousness of considering these things to be holy and etc.
We've got a lot of reference as a Muslim, but when we find ourselves in a corner, we say, yeah, because also we are from becoming Muslim. We think exactly instead of using our knowledge.
Big figure. No, Ibn Rushd, he made some errors in, you could say, in rationally trying to deal with some of Allah's attributes, praise. These are errors he made. But I would not say that he went outside of Islam. I mean, he was a well-known scholar, in Islamic law. He wrote, major books in these fields also. But he made some errors in the area of theology, for sure. Whereas in the case of Ibn Sina and who else? There's a group of them. We find also amongst a number of the Sufis who absorb the Neoplatonian concept of God, though in a unity that God, his existence was, and human existence, the angels, etc., were emanations from God, that ultimately we are products of God, we are gods, in essence. This thought took them out of the mainstream Islam. Not to say all, but a group. The Ikhwan, they call it Ikhwan al-Safa. These were some of the first to actually enunciate these beliefs, Neoplatonic beliefs, of giving it Islamic labels. And it carried down even till our times. We still find, some people who promote these views. And wherever you find really anyone who tries to promote the idea that man is God, this is a product of this, and this is considered pagan in origin. Plato proposed this in his understanding of man. He proposes. Hindus also hold this. Brahma, man, to going through the different stages, eventually evolved into a being that reunites with the world soul. That man, in essence, is a part of God.
Sometimes some people try to prove that Islam is scientifically, some certain things they try to prove even scientifically Islam is correct. Some people try to prove it. Do you think it is the right thing?
Well, we have to recognize that there are certain aspects of Islamic practices which are left with Allah. We cannot give rational explanations for everything. You know, Ali radiallahu anhu had said that if the religion were based on reason, rational thought, if this was the whole of the religion, this is the fundamental base of everything, then the bottom of the socks should be wiped and not the top. You know, when we make wudu and we wipe our socks in place of washing our feet, the bottom should be wiped and not the top. However, he said, I saw the Messenger of Allah wipe the top, not the bottom. So, you know, we understand that there are limits to man's ability to explain rationally everything. And there are dangers in trying to do that. People start to twist the meanings behind practices. And they can find themselves in a fix. I mean, I know of one particular case where this is how Islam was presented to a particular individual in Washington, that everything was rational, you can explain everything. And after he learned that, you know, when you make wudu, when you pass winds, that you have to make wudu all over again, this appeared to him to be irrational. And he asked people to explain to him rationally how this is, why. Everything else seemed to make sense, but it didn't seem to make sense to him. It didn't make sense. You've just washed, because you explain rationally when you're making wudu, you're washing these parts of your body which are normally exposed, and you finish and you pass wind, you go and you wash these parts out. Did you get these parts dirty? No. So why are you washing it all over again? So this jammed him up. And it was said he left Islam because of it. We pray that he would find his way back eventually. But it's the reality. We cannot try to rationally deal with every single aspect of Islam. Much of it is very rational, very reasonable, very practical. But there are aspects of it known only to Allah. He has commanded us to do them. We believe that there is a good reason for them, but we may not be able to understand. Yawm al-Qiyamah, these things may be revealed to us if we seek to understand it, and Allah wishes to reveal.
How would you comment about the determination of sex in the world and the knowledge of Al-Quran?
Well, if you see the verses, you know, the verses which refer to it talk about a series of things. It's not just sex, right? Yeah. And when a child is initially conceived, ultrasound cannot determine the sex of that child. Even in the early development of the child, though now they take samples of the amniotic fluid and they analyze it to try to determine, this they tell you is not 100% sure. It's still partially guesswork. They say this one's going to be a boy and it turns out to be a girl. They say it's going to be a girl, it turns out to be a boy. So they do not have clear knowledge. In terms of ultrasound, this is, when the child has developed to a certain point.
Refer to be violent, which means the unknown, which only Allah is aware of, like what happens in the church, or what happens tomorrow, or whether the rain is going to rain, or what is in the rain is rain. What she will get to know.
So what it is referring to in terms of the womb of the woman here, and also in the verses, it refers to whether a child will be born dead, whether it will be born alive. Yes, there's reference, there's actually clear reference to that in other verses. When you put all the verses together, we find this reference is there. What is in the womb? What is in the womb in what sense? Now, this is one aspect of it that we are not able to say. We cannot say who will be born. ما تغيض الأرحام. In the general sense. We may seed the clouds and rain comes. But not every cloud which is seeded rains. The weatherman, he predicts because it rained in Jordan and that cloud is coming here, it's going to rain here too. Oftentimes he's correct, but sometimes he's not. So our knowledge may, put us in a position where we're able to predict things a bit more, to some degree, but it is not real knowledge in the sense of absolute knowledge. We don't have that absolute knowledge. Well, scientifically, they have shown, and not to say this is the reason and the only reason, they've shown that it is the main carrier of trichinosis, a particular disease, caused by a particular worm which sets itself in the flesh of the pig, and it requires very high degrees of cooking, at high temperatures for it just to be killed. Most people, they're not able to, on a normal stove, to reach these temperatures. But you see, still we understand that it goes beyond that, because if somebody says to you, well, okay, we've got, a very powerful oven here, now we're going to cook it at this temperature, are you ready? We say no. No, because just because we have found one of the harms, doesn't mean that this was the one and only harm. No. They've also told people who have heart disease, they're told, not to eat pork because it has a high degree of fat, which is deposited in your system. Also, scientists in recent times have also shown that we are not able to break down pig fat. The fat of the cow and the goat, we have the enzymes to break it right on down and reassemble it in our body. Pig fat is broken down to smaller molecules, but it is redeposited in the system as is. There's the one Dr. Ahmed Sakar in the States. He's done extensive, he's a nutritionist. He's done extensive research on that. He has a book on it, showing scientifically. And it's not just pig fat. There are certain other animals too. The carnivorous animals, which are also prohibited to eat, have this quality also. So there may be something else which comes from it. Or as some scholars have pointed out, this is now reasoning that you are what you eat. What you eat, you're using to build your system up with. Certain animals carry certain characteristics which are part of their nature. You break this animal down in your body and you rebuild yourself with it. It could affect. No, well, we can say pork, animals which die of themselves in one way or another, either by strangling, falling, being gored, a variety of different ways. Basically, it's pork and animals which die of themselves. But then the Prophet ﷺ, based on revelation, expanded that to include carnivorous animals, and whether birds or land animals.
Not aquatic.
No. Aquatic animals are considered to be all halal except edible. Because we know the sea has certain qualities. An animal which dies in the sea, we eat. We eat a fish without slaughtering. Everything else we have to slaughter. But the fish, it dies of itself and we eat it.
The question of game is said that suppose you have a dog, take a game. And if you take the substance to that particular dog and the game is killed by the dog.
Well, not to the dog, but you say it when you send the dog off.
Sorry. When you send the dog. Exactly that particular dog, not any other dog that's
It's not really takbir though, it's Bismillah.
Yeah. And then that game becomes halal, although you have not slaughtered it. So it is not necessarily slaughtered again?
If you find it alive when you find the animal, if it's still living, then you slaughter it. If it is already dead, you are allowed to eat it. Well, see, because that's why we are saying that the fact of what makes an animal halal or haram is not a question of the blood coming out of the body. This is a mistaken explanation that some people have given. They say that it's haram if the blood remains in the body. If you cut the neck and allow it to bleed properly, then it becomes halal. Because if a non-Muslim, a Hindu, or a communist, a Buddhist, he slaughters that animal and says, in the name of Allah, you can't eat it. Right? You're not allowed to eat it. And if you slaughter the animal and didn't say the name of Allah, you're not allowed to eat it too. So it is not merely an issue of allowing the blood to flow or not allowing the blood to flow. No doubt, there is, to a certain degree, harm in the blood of the animal. We've seen this scientifically, blood carrying the germs of the body, purifying the body process, etc. There's some harm involved in there. However, wild game, again, has another quality, is put in another situation from domesticated animals. Like you're allowed to eat a wild donkey, but you're not allowed to eat a domesticated donkey. They're different. This is why in the scholars you have an animal in the wild which is called a boar. There's question as to, is this edible, can we eat this or not? He looks like a pig. Right? He's got tusks. Is it edible or not? But it's not a pig. The animals of the wild have a different ruling, according to Islamic law, to the domesticated animals. So where a wild animal, an animal of the wild, which is killed by your falcon, a bird, you have a bird that you train to kill, or a cat, or a dog, that these, if they die before they reach you, you're allowed to eat them. There's another quality, another factor which is involved there in terms of the way in which they live. If your trained dog, one day jumps, over the fence and kills one of your sheep, you can't eat it. See, this is in the case of hunting other wild animals. Well, as I said, there is difference of opinion concerning it. Some say, well, it looks like he belongs to the same family. He has similar, forms. But if you look at the wild boar, his lifestyle is different from the pig, which is raised locally. You see, the hyena, for example. The hyena, he looks like a dog. Right? And he will eat flesh. But he eats dead flesh. And the Prophet ﷺ said, you may eat it. halal. And what happens is that those people in Egypt, in Lower Egypt, they commonly eat the hyena there. You know, those who talk about the flesh of the hyena, if you read about it in the encyclopedia, they tell you, the comparison between it and dog flesh, for example, is quite vast, different. The flesh is sweet, it is not foul-smelling or anything. I mean, though we maybe feel repulsed by the idea of a hyena, but however, there are people who eat the hyena, and it has been permitted by the Prophet ﷺ.
The crab, which also lives in water as well as the land.
Well, you see, the living in the water and living on the land is not an issue of whether something is halal or haram. You know, what is an issue is whether, as a land animal, it's killed by the tooth or it flies and killed by the claw. Now, the crab does not kill by the tooth. It doesn't have teeth. So it's halal. Finished. Whether it's half in the water, half on land, or lives on the land all the time, whatever, it's halal.
But some people argue that it has a good claw, the right claw.
But the Prophet ﷺ said that the birds which kill by the claw are prohibited. The land animals, wild animals which kill with the eye tooth are prohibited. Does the crab fly? Does it bite with the eye tooth? No. And we can't do that. See, some people will say, for example, you had some scholars who ruled, for example, that the shark was prohibited. Because in Arabic, in the past, it was referred to as the sea dog. This is, you can't eat the dog on land, but you can't eat this one. Similarly, the porpoise was prohibited because in Arabic it was called khinzir al-bahr, a sea pig. So the ruling in Islam is not according to what you call the animal, but what the animal is in fact. Right? Sea animals are halal for us, land animals which kill by the eye tooth, wild animals, and birds which kill by the claw are prohibited. Other than that, halal. Well, you have some snakes which kill with the eye tooth. Those that do, you would then have to say are haram. And those that don't are halal. You could not prohibit all snakes. So we have a means of determining those which are halal, those which are haram.
Which of this is more authentic, Bilal? To kill a snake or poison a snake when you see it as right? They are not to kill it. Because the Prophet has said sometimes, don't kill a snake.
No, he said if you find a snake in your home, right? And this is, he specifically refers to Medina actually. So I mean, although this has been generally looked on a whole, when he was referring, he talked about in the homes in Medina, right? You find a snake in your home. You are told to command it to leave. Because snakes, particularly those in the homes in Medina, the jinn, some jinn live in snake form. If it does not leave after you've commanded it, then you are permitted to kill it. Well, you can't take it. Well, the jinn, I would say it understands any language, but the jinn of an area will understand the language of that area. It's like a dog, for example, right? People who train dogs, for example, in Germany, using German, you try to use English, it's not going to work. Yeah. Frogs, very easy. I'm going to say it's very easy. Do frogs kill with the eye teeth?
Why I'm asking this question is because recently there was a French food
Frog's legs. It's a delicacy in France.
one of these players The issue came up later as to why frog legs were imported from France because it's
Imported?
from France.
Well, really, frog legs are not usually, maybe it was prepared in France.
No,
But the French,
not prepared.
because the French, it's bought outside of France. You have many countries that are producing it, the frog legs for the French.
Yeah, wherever it was imported, somebody was imported in the kingdom, and it was thought that it was prohibited item. It should not have been imported in the kingdom because it is not edible for the Muslims. So that's false.
It's false. That's not according to me. See, if you're going to say it is not edible, then you must bring evidence from the Quran or from the Sunnah. We don't have, what some people may say, well, it comes under the general category of khaba'is, filthy things. But what is filthy to you will not be filthy to somebody else. You can't use that because that is varying according to culture and society, what is known to be filthy by all people, then that's another situation. What may vary from society to society, you can't. Chocolate coated ants, bees, people eat these too. Halal. That's prohibited.
Basically, it's only a question of one state.
Yes.
And the other
In Indochina, what they commonly do, they leave fish, they eat, they leave it to rot. And the juices that drip on it, they put a plate of rice underneath. And when it's good and rotten, then they eat it. You will find it offensive to smell, you'll be sick to your stomach, but it's a delicacy amongst them. This is just different culture. You cannot say it's prohibited. Like they have a desert lizard here they call the dub. It's a fat-bodied lizard, which was presented to the Prophet Muhammad to eat. And before he ate of it, one of his wives told him, "Well, do you know what this is?" And he said, "No," and she informed him that this was dub, so he didn't eat. And but I think it was Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was there beside him, so he asked, he said, "Is this prohibited?" He said, "No, it was just in the area where I'm from, it was not there, and I don't have a liking for it." So he went and ate his and ate the Prophet's. These are just customs. People have different tastes, likes and dislikes. Some of them have been taught for, in their parts of the body. You may find this in books of fiqh, even, especially the Hanafi fiqh, because they have generally done a lot of speculation, using the mind to reason out many, many different things, going beyond the text. So you'll find quite often they've ended up, prohibiting or allowing things which are not. Quite a few. As a school of thought, it's the one which is the farthest from the Quran and Sunnah. The Hanafi school.
Some sweets contain some pork fat, gelatin and all that.
So it should be prohibited. Yeah, if you determine that it contains it, then it should be prohibited to you. No, but this is a different issue. It's a different issue. See, that which is coming in food products, they have testing systems here, which are analysis, which have atomic analysis, and pork has a particular pattern which they put the foods through. If they identify it, it is not brought in the country. But animals which are slaughtered in Britain are considered to be halal, even though they are not according to Islamic, what we call Islamic method. Right? As long as they're not strangled or clubbed to death, etc., the necks are cut, that is sufficient. Without saying Allah's name over it, it's not a requirement for them. We're allowed, we've been given permission to eat it. That's another issue. I know some people have taken the position that if they do not say Allah's name and cut the neck of the animal the same way that we do, then it's haram. But actually it's an extreme position. The more correct position is that as long as the people are Christian people or Jewish people as a whole. Some people say, well, they're not the Christians like the Christians of the time of the Prophet ﷺ, No, of course they are. It's the same thing. They were talking about a live street. It's in the Quran. These are the same people who are allowed to marry their women and eat their food. The animals which they slaughter. It's not an argument. As long as they don't if they take another name other than Allah's name, or if they kill the animal with electricity, or strangle the animal, which is known to you, then it's haram. But usually, I know in America, they use a gun, right? Which is a stun gun. But it doesn't kill the animal. It just gives it a blow to the head which puts it unconscious so they can control it. This is just for purposes of, speed in handling the animal. That is still halal. As long as it's determined that this does not kill the animal, then it is halal. If it is determined that it kills the animal, then it becomes haram. And as far as we found out in the States, what was being done, the animal was not killed. It was still living when they slaughtered it. They have vegetable sources of gelatin also. Of course, you can get jello, which is from vegetable sources. Any other animal factor? Sure.